So actually, Kalindi, I want to ask you the same question I asked Joe, but maybe from a lifestyle perspective, especially like a wellness and mindfulness
Yeah.
perspective. What do you say are three negative and three or positive, or two or three, whatever comes up, but just
Yeah.
certain lifestyle or mindfulness type habits that we get into? Kind of Joe just mentioned, right? The rushing and the this and that. Like what are those types of habits that you see that really then translate in life, but also on the court, and how we
Yeah.
play both, maybe more from a wellness perspective.
Yeah. So the first one that comes to mind is just not being in the present moment. I think we think for granted, well, of course I'm in the present moment. Like, where else would I be? Well, you should be there, but I'll kind of ask you guys, and by extension, everyone who's going to be watching this, have you ever driven somewhere and then you're at your destination and could you actually recall how you got there?
Yeah.
I mean, I can raise my
Very
hand. I've been
guilty.
guilty of that. And
Very
yeah, I
guilty.
love to give that example because it's also like, well, that sounds unsafe if you don't remember how you got somewhere, because you clearly weren't focused on driving if you were thinking about other things in the, past and the future. And our minds are very wired to go into worrying about the past, thinking about the past, worrying about the future, thinking about the future. It's like we want to be anywhere but the present moment.
Mm.
And that's what mindfulness, that practice, is all about. It's about noticing when your mind is going off somewhere else and bringing it back to this moment. And that's of course super applicable in all areas of life, as well as any sports, tennis, pickleball, anything else. Because if you're that's why it can be, the sports can be such a great training ground for mindfulness, because you really have to focus on hitting the ball. That's your present moment. That's what's happening next. If you don't, you're probably not going to hit an ideal shot, but it's very tempting to be like, oh man, you're still thinking about that shot you missed in the last point. You're worried about, oh no, what if I don't win this point? Then we're going to be behind. So yeah, the couple of others that come to mind, and this one's a little bit of a preview of the exercise that I was going to take us through later on in this webinar, is, I don't know if anyone else has had the experience of like a self-critical voice on your shoulder that like tells you like mean things about yourself. It's like, oh man, like, I don't know, I'm the only one that has that. And then there's sometimes a much smaller voice trying to like tell that voice to be quiet. So basically it's the self-critical voice that we all seem to, many people have. And that can be really challenging because of course it's good to learn from. If you made a mistake, you want to take corrective action and improve, and there might be a moment of frustration or upset. But if that self-critical voice turns into like a monologue of negativity in your head, that's not going to help you in life or on the court. And so it's really, that's where like the mindful self-compassion piece that I really feel like completes the mindfulness picture, because it's about working on identifying not just when we're not, when we left the present moment, but what that voice is like, and can we shift it to be a little bit nicer to ourselves? Can we treat ourselves like we would a dear friend, a loved one? Like, chances are you probably don't just go on rants against your friends and partners about like what awful people they are. If you do, I bet they would like take it up with you and be like, hey, like, you're not a good friend. So we need to work on being good friends to ourselves. The exercise we're going to do will give a little bit of a practice of how to do that. And just the last one that comes to mind has to do with the breath and breathing, which is so important. We need to breathe to live. It is something that happens without us needing to think about it, but it can be very helpful to think about it, because when we get tense, which we talked about earlier, what happens is the breath gets shallow and tends to come up higher into, back up a little, it gets up more into the chest, and you're like, okay, isn't that where you breathe from? Well, not ideally. Ideally, you want to be taking long, slow exhales, all the way into your belly, and then you let that inhale just happen naturally. I found that's a really good way to think about it. So, you know, letting the exhale, letting it all out as much as you can, and then you just let that inhale arise naturally, and just checking in. It's an easy thing to do throughout the day, or when you're on court, is how is my breathing? Is it tense, or is it relaxed? And you know, as an interesting experiment, like, you want to just try like squeezing your fists like really hard for a moment, just like squeeze it, lots of tension. All right, how's your breathing? Nice and deep. No,
Right.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
And then just take that deep exhale, see what happens to your fists, and see if you can you do both at the same time. So I'm going to do it with a nice deep exhale. It's like impossible. I can't do both at the same time.